Hi, my name's Angela and I'm with APQS Raleigh. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this mask that has ties on it with your long arm. You're going to be making the mask part of it. The ties will be put on with your domestic sewing machine. But to give you an idea, if you have a 3-yard piece of wide back, you can actually get 216 masks out of 3 yards that are 108 inches wide. You would need 2 pieces of white back, obviously, but it is a really quick way to get a lot of masks done quickly. One of the things I want to talk about is how you load the long arm. I made an assumption when I loaded my long arm that I was going to be able to put the 2 pieces of material together and pin them on as one unit. That didn't work really well for me. You can see that I have all these ripples up here. I was able to basically punt and do it a different way. By sewing a straight line and getting it completely flat where the line is. And so I'm going to be able to use this still to do my mask. However, the next time I load, I'm going to be doing a full float because that's what I normally do on my long arm. So my suggestion to you would be to load the long arm the way that you normally do. The one difference is going to be that the right side of your fabric needs to be facing up. As long armers, we're used to having the right side facing down. But in this case, you want the right sides of both fabric facing each other on the long arm so that when we flip them, it's right sides out. So I have the right sides of both of my fabrics facing towards each other. It doesn't really matter that in this case because it's Kona cotton on the top, same color on both sides. And then I have a batik on the back, also the same on both sides. So in this case, it doesn't matter which side's up and which side's not. Both of them are going to work perfectly fine. You're also going to notice that I'm putting pins down the sides instead of sewing down, which can cause a ripple. I went ahead and pulled my material slightly taut and pinned it both on the sides and then right in front of my belly bar too, so that I could make sure that everything that was nice and flat inside my window. So you can see the pins running here as well. Okay, so in this video you're going to learn how to do the mask with ties. There's actually even going to be a filter space on it, if I could remember which end it's on, where you can put a little filter up inside of it. And then when you're finishing it, you get to choose if you're going to put 3 pleats or 2. I prefer the 2-pleat method, but there's no right and wrong on this. It's just whatever you feel is most comfortable when you're sewing it or you think is going to be most comfortable for people. The other thing I want to point out is you're going to see all kinds of things that say one type of material is better than another type of material on the internet, and people are taking vehement stands on what is the best possible material. I have chosen to listen to Wake Med, which is part of Wake Forest Baptist Medical Hospital, and they did a study on quilters cotton specifically. I'll have a link on my website, which is threadwaggle.com. And they are saying to use batiks. So all my masks have batik on at least one side of them as a filter. And then you can put pretty quilter cotton on the other side. I actually, when I'm doing mask for my family, will do 2 levels of batik and then put quilter's cotton, which is actually how this mask is made. There's actually 3 layers of material in it. So it just depends on what you feel is right. I'm not going to tell you what's right and wrong. You just need to decide for yourself and go with it. So I'm in the pantograph section of QuiltPath and I'm using basic mode. I am going to set up a multi-row pantograph to quilt my design. And when you first go into pantograph and you set your safe area, it's actually putting the numbers for your safe area down in your quilt height and quilt width. I am on a 7-foot frame. I've actually set up a show frame in my house because I can't be at my showroom right now. So my frame is only 7 feet long. So typically your quilt width is going to be way bigger than mine is, probably double what mine is. But I only have 60 inches that I can play with on this little frame. So I'm going to set up the most masks that I can make fit in 60 inches. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start by selecting my pattern. And I am going to go to the AC mask with ties pattern because we're doing the one with ties. And I'm going to open that. Okay, so it doesn't look like it's opened anything, but it has. I can slightly see the blue around the edges, so I know the mask is in there. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to tap the Equal Edges button, which is the one on the bottom. What that's going to do for you is make sure that there is an edge of a mask on both sides of your quilting area that you've set up. And it means that you can set off of your top left corner of the top left mask. Okay, so that's an important button. We're going to do equal center. It's also going to let you lock the aspect ratio, which is going to be important in just a second. The next thing I want to do is I know I can get 3 rows of mask in here. And I know that because I have 18 inches of quiltable space and a medium-sized mask is 5.5 inches tall. Okay, so when I do my 5.5 inches tall and a half an inch in between each mask, I need my total height to be 17.5, right? So that's 5.5 times 3 plus an inch in between each one, okay? And then I'm going to come up to where it says pattern height, and I'm going to actually set that at 5.5, which is what I want the finished size of my mask to be. Okay, it gets a little confusing for us because we're used to cutting a half an inch bigger than we actually need something because we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam. In this case, it's sewing the seam, so we only need it to put in the number we want finished. Okay, so after I get that done, I'm going to come over to size and I'm going to lock my little padlock for my aspect ratio lock. And I'm doing that because I want this to stay the same when I start adding mask on the width. So I am going to change my width, my pattern width, to 8.5, which is what I want the width to be when it's done. And then the last thing that I want to do is add repeats. So I would sit here and add repeats. You see the 2? I'm going to go back for a second. See how it put these 2 on the opposite ends? That's going to help you out in a few minutes. So I'm going to sit here and add mask in between until I get them to touch and then back off one. There's no scientific, well, there is a scientific way, but that's the quickest way for me to say, okay, this is how many I can fit in this space. Now I am going to tell you that I don't want to quilt and waste fabric, right? So I now know that I can fit 6 masks in there. So if I take my 6 mask, right? If I take 8.5 and I multiply it by 6, I'm going to get 51 inches. And then I can count the space between. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 half inches that I need, or 2.5 inches. So when I add that to my 51, I'm going to get 53.5. I'm actually going to just set my width real quick to 54. Okay, oops. I'm going to actually set it to 54, not 200. How's that for a deal? It's going to give me a little bit more than a half inch. It's just going to help me cut it later, but it's just to help me a little bit. Okay, so now I've got this set up the way I want it. That's how many masks I can fit on this frame. So I would save this so that I can use it later. And I actually have done that, but I'm going to go ahead and use this one. It looks exactly the same way as this one does, right? I would just hit quilt as a single pattern. Now, I could do quilt as rows with this, but the issue with that is going to be that it's going to quilt 1, and I'm going to have to interface with the system, quilt 1, interface with the system. In this case, I don't want to do that. I just want it to quilt and not bug me, right? Because I'm probably going to be sewing ties on while this is running. So what I want to do is some of these I can optimize out and some I can't. If I was to optimize this jump stitch right here and this jump stitch right here out, it would sew a straight line down, and I wouldn't be able to use those 2 masks unless I picked that out. 2 reasons I don't want to do that. I don't want the extra holes in that mask if I want it to filter well, right? So I don't want to pick it out after it's done because that would put holes in it that to me just don't make sense. So what I can do though is optimize, and then I can take out the jump stitches that I can. So I can click right on these little blue buttons. I actually think I reversed the stitching on one for a second. We're going to play with that in a minute. But I can, if I click right on the blue ones, it'll take it off, right? And I did reverse it that time, so you got to be kind of careful. If you click on a line instead of the blue dot, it will want to reverse your stitching on it. So the other way that I can do this is to check for breaks, and then I would need to know where I am when I'm doing it. So this is section 1, here's section 2. So I need to take the jump stitch out between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, but not between 3 and 4. So I can do animate stitches. So I want to take the one between 1 and 2 out, and the one between 2 and 3 out. Then I would say no for the one between 3 and 4. Then I can say yes, coming back across here, right? And I can say yes to this one, and I want to say no again, right? And then yes, all the way through, until it asks me if I want to connect the first and last points, and I say no. And that would leave me with 2 jump stitches. But you can see that I messed this up somehow, right? And I did reverse something. Not a big deal. All I have to do is hit the back button. And then what I did was reverse those 2. Now you see it looks right. And then I could do my optimize again. So I'm going to show you one more time. I'm going to do animate stitches. And I'm going to say yes between 1 and 2. Yes between 2 and 3. And say no. Then I'm going to do yes, 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 until it's on this very last one. Then I'm going to say no, and then hit yes until it asks me if I want to connect the first and last stitches. Do I want to connect the first and last? No. And now it's as optimized as I can make it without redesigning the program. So I'm going to say yes. And now I'm going to tell you another trick. You don't have to do this every single time. If I save this here, and I'm just going to, I have a mask folder in my patterns directory that I've created, and I'm going to do, oops, show frame. I'm just going to put show on there so I know which one. I'll know it's my show frame mask. Now I can set it up for the full size for that 17.5 by 54 inches, and it's going to quilt like this every single time. So once you've got it optimized, you only have to do it once, and then it's ready to go for the next time. Now we're ready to sew. So I am going to go up to my settings up here at the top. I want to make sure that pause at trim lines is not checked. When I have those 2 jump stitches, I want it to tack off, jump, tack off, and sew again. So I'm not having to interface a whole lot with my machine while it's quilting. And then the other thing, I have set really large tie-offs at those openings so that when people are putting filters in and out of their mask, it's harder for them to rip. So there's actually a 1/2 inch back tack on every single one of those masks. I'm going to go ahead and leave this tack off too, so there'll be 2 tack offs. It's just going to be a lot more secure that way. But I want you to know it's going to go, your whole long arm is going to go back and forth a 1/2 inch on the start and end of every single mask. And that's in addition to the regular tack off that QuiltPath would do. I want to go to 1 point for my settings and do corner, right? Because I'm going to set off of this top left mask. Okay? Then I'm going to move my long arm back. And I just want to keep it away from my pins, guys. I don't want to hit a pin. And I can see where I am in my space when I use that. So I'm moving my long arm needle to where I want that top corner to be, hitting the button. It's set into the space I want it to be. Now I'm going to move to the start point. The start point is right here. I can do that one of 2 ways. You can use pull bobbin, which is right here. It's not my preferred way, but you're welcome to use that if that's how you do it. I actually prefer to do the toolbox and do move to start point. And the reason is that it releases my carriage when it gets to the start point. So I can easily bring my bobbin up manually with my long arm. So it is stopping right here. I'm going to hit the down arrow, or the down button, and then the needle up button, grab my bobbin thread, which is right here, and I'm going to pull my thread for my bobbin thread up to the top. And then I want to hold both of these, and I tend to roll them around my finger when I'm doing that. I'm not sure why, I've just always done it, so it gives a little bit of pressure though. Once I have the bobbin thread to the top, I'm going to hit sew. And I'm going to let the long arm start. And I'm going to pull away from the way it's sewing. Just slightly. And then I can drop that and let it go. And because we're in a small space with a long arm, we're going to go ahead and stop this and let you see what happens when it's finished. So now the 18 masks that I can quilt in my 7 feet are done. So I'm going to cut this string. There was one jump stitch. There was one on the other side too. I did cut the one on the bottom too. I just don't want the loop because I don't want it to catch on anything. Then I'm going to forward this up and put, you know, about a half of an inch below these masks that are quilted in this general vicinity here, and I'm going to start up again. So I'll be back with you as soon as I get the quilt forwarded. Okay, so this is my sewing line for the bottom of the row of masks I just finished. So I've forwarded my quilt and I've stretched all the material out, made it all smooth, right? Put pins in the side of it. I want my clamps to be on that I just realized weren't on. And then I'm going to drop my hopping foot down at least a half an inch. In this case, I'm dropping it down an inch, but you want to drop it down just a little bit from the line. And then you're going to hit your one point block corner placement button, and it's going to align it. Okay, we're going to put it back just a little bit more than that because we're outside of our safe area. There we go. So you do have to be inside your safe area. Okay, so now we're ready to sew, and I'm going to start it off and do another 18 mask. Okay, so I timed how long it took me to do a row, a 3-row pass of mask this way, and it took me a grand total of just, let's say, 8.5 minutes. So I can do 18 masks in 8.5 minutes, and then it's going to take a little bit of time to put the ties on. The longest amount of putting the ties on is folding well, I'm going to call it binding to put down the sides. Because you have to fold it and then fold into the center and iron it again to be able to put it on the mask. That being said, I do the pleats and the binding on all in one shot. So once that part is made, and I make a whole bunch of yardage of binding that's folded twice, and I can do one mask right after another. So it really is a production way of doing this, and it's working really well. I will be shooting another video to show you how to put the ties on, how to make the ties, and how to put them on the edges of the mask. But for now, if we start actually getting the mask sewn, we'll be way ahead of the game and be able to get masks out to our friends, our neighbors, and out to the community in large, to anyone who needs one. Once the sheet of mask comes off of your long arm, you need to cut them apart. So that's what I've been doing, is cutting big long strips of these off. There's 4 right here. And then I would turn it sideways and cut between each individual one, which leaves me with a bunch of things that look like this, right? So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it right side out. I'm just going to get my fingers down in the corners and poke them out and get all 4 corners out. I find it a little bit easier to actually pinch those corners and bring them through the opening than just kind of grabbing them. You can see me getting my finger down in there. And then I use a chopstick, it happened to be the pokey thing that we had, to kind of poke my corners out a little bit. It's going to be covered by a sash, so it's not going to be super critical that these are square. They can be a little rounded, and they are a little rounded when they get done. So here's the mask, and then here's a mask that I've actually ironed. When I'm doing these, I do a double pleat, so I'm doing pleats that face each other. So this would actually be the front of the mask. On the back of the mask, I want these pleats to almost touch, right? They actually do touch in this case, because it gives me more cupping around the face when the mask is sewn together. So what I'm going to do now is take some extra binding that I had left over, and you need to take it to your ironing board and iron the center or the edges to the center. Right, so you're going to double fold it like that and iron it down. Once it's ironed down, we're going to put it onto the edge of the mask. You want your ties to be somewhere around 35 inches for the average person. Maybe a little longer if you're making bigger mask. If you're putting your ties across the top and the bottom, they need to be over 40 inches. So 35 inches if you're putting them on the short side, 40 inches if you're putting them on the long side. The nice thing about putting them on the short side is that you still have that area that you turned that people can put filters in if they want to. I'm going to take the end of the tie that we've ironed, the long sides into the center, right? And I'm going to fold it over. All I'm doing is making it look a little more finished on the end of the tie. So I'm folding it down and then folding it back in towards the center. And then to help myself out, I'm going to either pin or use a clip to put them together. So I would just pin it in. And that's just so that I can get it to my sewing machine. Then I need to find the center of my strip, right? So that's the center. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it onto my mask. So you can notice I've pinned my little pleats in place. It just helps me get this over here a little easier and hold it on. So I'm going to put this on like this so that it's on both sides of the mask and all the way down inside that seam. And I've caught something on the back of it. So you just want to make sure that you've got it nestled all the way deep so that it's touching your pressed line. And then I'm going to put these clips on. I find the clips to be a little bit easier to use than pins. But either way, as long as you've got it so that it's not going to move when you start sewing, it's going to all be great. So I'm going to start by sewing down one side. I want to make sure that my tie isn't twisted before I start sewing. So I've moved my needle over so that it's going to catch the inside, just inside of this where these two sides meet. And I'm going to start out, I'm going to back tack, and then I'm going to come forward again. And you want to make sure you're back tacking on all this stuff because it's going to get used and used hard, guys. So make sure that you are making a product that can be used well. I will tell you this actually goes pretty quickly when you're able to be directly on your sewing machine needle. We're trying to get the camera directly on, so I'm sitting over here to the right and not able to really see what's going on at my needle. So we're just trusting that it's sewing well for us, and we'll find out when it gets done. I'm going to go ahead and get these up so that they don't catch on the bed on my sewing machine. Okay, and when I come on to this little mask, I'm going to back tack right here, and the reason is I think that that's going to take more, a little bit more pressure, or torque on it. So I want to make sure that it's not going to come off on the person that's using it. I'm going to actually take all the clips out and just hold them. Once you get up here on this mask, those clips aren't really needed, surprisingly. So you just need it until the mask gets up there. Take my pin out so I know I don't hit it. And then I'm going to back tack. And then I would start feeding in the next side. Okay. So I think you've got the idea for this. I'm going to let you guys start doing yours, and I'll show you the finished mask in just a second. And there we go, one completed mask. It took me about 30 seconds-ish to sew the mask on the long arm, each individual mask. It takes me under a minute to sew everything on the ties on, I mean, it's probably about the same amount of time, to be honest with you. The thing that takes me the longest is loading the long arm, which is a one-time thing for all the masks that you're going to be able to do in that, session, and then making the ties. And really, even making the ties wasn't bad. It's like making binding, and we're used to doing that. So this one is going to, it's going to cup, right, because of the way it's made. It is designed to cup around. You can still put a filter up inside of it, and but it's a completed mask. It's ready to go out. I will wash these before I send them out, and when you wash them, when you're doing ties, make sure you tie all these together. Otherwise, if you've ever washed a bunch of bras that weren't hooked together, you know how much of a mess that is. It's going to be a big mess in your laundry machine as well.